The Rebellious Trinity: How AI, Crypto, and Populism Became Democracy's Favorite Problem Children. Three seemingly unrelated forces are converging to challenge every established authority in sight. They might just reshape civilization or break it. In the grand theater of contemporary disruption, three unlikely protagonists have emerged from different corners of the stage, each wielding their own particular brand of chaos. Artificial intelligence promises to make every expert obsolete. Cryptocurrencies vow to liberate us from the tyranny of central banks. Populist movements pledge to restore power to the people while dismantling the very institutions that define democratic governance. What these three phenomena share, beyond an impressive capacity for generating breathless headlines, is something more profound: a bone-deep suspicion of established authority and an almost religious faith in the power of decentralization to solve humanity's problems. They are, in essence, the rebellious children of the digital age, each convinced that the grown-ups have been doing everything wrong. The DNA of disruption. Like siblings who've inherited the same troublemaking gene, AI, cryptocurrency, and populism share a common ideological chromosome: the belief that traditional gatekeepers are not just inefficient, but fundamentally corrupt. Whether it's the Federal Reserve controlling monetary policy, university professors controlling knowledge, or career politicians controlling governance, all three movements see centralized authority as the enemy of human flourishing. This shared anti-establishment ethos isn't merely philosophical, it's practical. Populist leaders use social media to bypass traditional journalism. Cryptocurrency advocates build financial systems that route around banks. AI developers create tools that can outperform credentialed experts in narrow domains. Each represents a different flavor of the same basic recipe: take power from the few and distribute it to the many, preferably through technology that makes traditional intermediaries obsolete. The timing isn't coincidental. All three phenomena emerged or gained prominence during periods of institutional crisis. Bitcoin's Genesis block, famously embedded with the message "Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks," was mined in 2009 as the financial establishment was revealing its spectacular failures. Populist movements surged after decades of declining trust in government and media. AI's recent breakthrough came as experts were failing spectacularly at predicting everything from election outcomes to pandemic responses. The democratization paradox. Each movement promises to democratize its respective domain, though what they mean by democracy varies considerably. Populists want to democratize politics by eliminating the buffer of representative institutions and expert advice that stands between the will of the people and policy outcomes. Crypto enthusiasts want to democratize finance by removing the need for trusted third parties in transactions. AI boosters want to democratize expertise by making high-level cognitive capabilities available to anyone with an internet connection. The irony, of course, is that these democratizing forces often concentrate power in new ways. The largest AI models are controlled by a handful of tech giants. Cryptocurrency wealth is highly concentrated among early adopters. Populist movements frequently evolve into personality cults around charismatic leaders who brook little dissent. This pattern reveals something important about our contemporary moment. The appetite for anti-establishment disruption is so strong that we're willing to overlook the potential for new forms of elite capture, as long as they come packaged with the right rhetoric about empowering ordinary people. The truth wars. Perhaps nowhere is this convergence more dangerous than in the realm of epistemology, the question of how we know what we know. Traditional models of truth-telling relied on institutional gatekeepers: journalists who fact-checked, scientists who peer-reviewed, experts who had spent decades mastering their fields. Each of our three phenomena attacks this model from a different angle. Populism declares that expert consensus is inherently suspect, the product of elite groupthink rather than genuine knowledge. Cryptocurrency replaces human judgment with algorithmic consensus. Truth is whatever the blockchain says it is. AI threatens to flood the information environment with synthetic content of uncertain provenance, while simultaneously offering to replace human experts with black box algorithms. The result is an epistemic crisis that makes democratic deliberation increasingly difficult. When citizens can't agree on basic facts, whether about election results, vaccine efficacy, or climate change, the entire premise of democratic governance comes under strain. The three movements don't just challenge specific policies or institutions, they challenge the foundations of shared reality itself. Digital tribes and echo chambers. The internet, which enables all three phenomena, has created new forms of social organization that bypass traditional geographical and institutional boundaries. Cryptocurrency communities organize entirely online, bound together by shared belief in decentralized finance. AI development increasingly happens in open source communities that route around traditional academic hierarchies. Populist movements use social media to create parallel information ecosystems that feel more trustworthy than mainstream media. These networked communities have real advantages. They're more agile than traditional institutions, more responsive to their members' needs, and often more innovative. But they also tend toward insularity and extremism. When your community is bound together primarily by opposition to external authorities, it becomes difficult to engage constructively with those authorities or to accept that they might occasionally be right. The institutional reckoning. The challenge facing traditional institutions is existential. Central banks are discovering that their monopoly on currency creation may not survive the cryptocurrency era. Universities are finding that their role as knowledge gatekeepers is threatened by AI systems that can generate expert-level content on demand. Democratic governments are learning that their authority to set policy may not survive in an environment where significant portions of the population simply reject their legitimacy. Some institutions are adapting. The Federal Reserve is exploring central bank digital currencies. Universities are experimenting with AI-augmented education. Government agencies are using blockchain for transparency and AI for efficiency. But adaptation may not be enough if the underlying trust that legitimizes these institutions continues to erode. The path forward. The convergence of AI, cryptocurrency, and populism represents more than a political or technological challenge. It's a civilizational stress test. The question isn't whether these forces will reshape our institutions, but whether they'll do so constructively or destructively. The optimistic scenario involves what we might call constructive disruption. Traditional institutions successfully adapting to incorporate the innovations and address the legitimate grievances that fuel these movements. Governments become more transparent and responsive. Financial systems become more inclusive and efficient. Knowledge production becomes more democratic while maintaining quality controls. The pessimistic scenario involves institutional collapse without replacement, a fragmentation of authority into competing tribes, each with its own truth, its own currency, and its own leader. In this world, the shared foundations that make large-scale cooperation possible simply disappear. Which scenario we get depends largely on whether we can channel the legitimate energy behind these movements toward institutional reform rather than institutional destruction. The rebels aren't wrong that many of our traditional authorities have become sclerotic, unresponsive, and sometimes corrupt. But the solution to bad institutions isn't no institutions, it's better institutions. The three phenomena examined here share one final characteristic. They're all, in their own way, expressions of a fundamentally human desire for agency and control in an increasingly complex world. That desire isn't going away, regardless of what policymakers or technologists do. The question is whether we can satisfy it in ways that preserve the benefits of coordination and expertise that institutions, at their best, provide. In the end, the rebellious trinity of AI, crypto, and populism may force us to rebuild the social contract from the ground up. Whether that rebuilding produces something better or just different remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the age of unquestioned institutional authority is over. What comes next will depend on how wisely we channel the revolutionary energy these movements represent.